The child comes into the world with a very high need for love and touching. And a tremendous amount of research indicates that we need a lot of love and touching all of our lives, but especially in our formative years, because as a child, we learn who we are, how valuable we are, whether we're important, intelligent, attractive, lovable, funny. We learn all of these things by the way our parents treat us. If our parents, our siblings, our aunts and uncles, but especially our parents, treat us like we're really important kids, then we grow up thinking that we're really important. If our parents do not, then something else happens. We know that the first few years of life are the most important in developing the self-concept. That the child starts off at 0 when the child is born with no idea of who she is or who he is or how valuable they are. And in the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth years of life, and the youth psychologists used to think it was 5 years, but now they're saying it's 3 years. In these first 3 years of life, children learn who they are. They say if you give enough high quality and quantity of love to a child in the first 3 to 5 years, you set them up for life. You set them up on a solid foundation of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, self-value. As a matter of fact, there's a direct relationship between the quality and quantity of love and the development of healthy personality. That the more love, unconditional love that a child receives in those formative years, the stronger is the foundation of the personality. To reverse the equation, that virtually all problems in psychosis, neurosis, personality disturbances, and behavior problems arise from problems way down in the self-concept. And we can go back as adults. Here's our adult personality. We can go back as adults. We can correct the flaws in our foundation, the cracks, if you like, by repeating over and over again, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, and driving down that healing concrete deep into the foundation of our personality. Remember, children need love like roses need rain. Children that are deprived of love often die of love starvation. It's a disease called marasmus. Now, what else do we know about children? We know that children come into the world with 2 remarkable attributes. The first is that they're fearless. Children are born with no fears. They're not afraid of anything except falling and loud noises. And this is expressed in the attitude, I can. Children come into the world believing they can do anything. And anybody who's ever raised a child to the age of 3 or 4 or 5 knows you have to spend those first few years stopping them from killing themselves because they're little kamikaze pilots, because they're not afraid of anything. The second attribute is they come into the world completely spontaneous. They say what they want, they do what they want, they are completely uninhibited. They just are completely unafraid. They do anything that they want, and this is expressed in the attitude, I don't have to. I don't have to. If you ever try to control a child, you'll find that the attitude of a young child, the first thing they say is when you start giving them orders, the first thing they learn is no. They say, no, I don't have to. Well, of course, we eventually change their minds on that one way or another. But these are the 2 attributes that each of us come into the world with. You come into the world unafraid and uninhibited. What does that mean? It means that our natural birthright is to be unafraid and uninhibited. And that only when we can create the same situation in adult life where we are unafraid and uninhibited do we feel truly great about ourselves. The very best organizations, the very best companies are those that create an environment where people who feel unafraid and unreserved to be themselves and to do the very best they can. Well, as we grow up, we know that children learn 2 ways. The first way they learn is by imitation. They imitate one or both parents, especially the dominant parent. And sometimes the dominant parent will change as the child is growing up. Sometimes children will imitate the father, sometimes the mother, but they learn by imitation. Many of the characteristics and habits that we have as adults, we learn from our parents. Have you ever had the opportunity or the occasion to scream at one of your children or shout at one of them and find yourself saying the same things your mother or father said to you when you were a child? Well, we imitate. Sometimes we imitate their walk. Sometimes we imitate their talk. Sometimes we imitate their values, their beliefs, and so on, even if those values and beliefs are of no value. Why? It's because our parents are like gods to us when we're children. The second way that we learn is by moving from discomfort, from what doesn't feel good, toward comfort. Now, Freud called this the pleasure principle, is that we move toward what makes us feel comfortable, what gives us pleasure, what makes us feel good about ourselves. We move from discomfort toward comfort. That's how we learn to become toilet trained. We say it's no longer fun to walk around with pee and poop in our diapers. So we watch what our parents do, we watch what our older siblings do, and we see, those people aren't doing this, and that's how we learn to walk, that's how we learn everything. So we move from discomfort toward comfort. Throughout our lives, by the way, that's how we learn. We imitate by reading what other people have done, by studying books, at our work. We imitate when we go to school. And we do what gives us a positive payoff, what gives us positive reinforcement, what gives us pleasure. And we do less of those things that give us discomfort or pain. Now, very early in life, as a mistake or as the result of mistakes that parents make in upbringing, children begin to learn just negative habit patterns. And negative habit patterns have their root primarily in destructive criticism. Destructive criticism begins very early in life, sometimes in the first few months. And destructive criticism is used by parents to direct and control their children. Unfortunately, it has a very, very dangerous and damaging effect on children in that destructive criticism begins to undermine the integrity of the child's personality, and more of us, including myself and including most of you, have been undermined and hurt by destructive criticism probably more than all the wars in history. Now, as a result of destructive criticism, we begin to develop negative habit patterns. Negative habit patterns are conditioned responses to stimuli. Negative habit patterns develop very early in life. They're developed as a result of a repetition of fear and pain over and over again. They're developed as the result of destructive criticism, physical punishment, and so on. And very early in life, we begin to develop two major manifestations which follow us throughout our lives and, more than anything else, inhibit our potential as adults. The first is what is called the inhibitive negative habit pattern. The inhibitive negative habit pattern is learned when the child is told over and over again, don't, get away from there, stop, leave that alone. And the child is punished. Whenever the child tries something new or gets into something or smells something or pours something over or breaks something accidentally, the parent blows up and gets angry and upset. You see, the child is driven by an insatiable curiosity to explore his or her world. And what happens is when they do explore it and they get into something, they tip something over, if the parent overreacts and spanks the child soon begins to think that every time I try something new, every time I try something different, every time I go beyond my boundaries, every time I move out of my comfort zone, every time I don't play it safe, I get spanked, I get punished, I get hurt, I get sent to my bedroom, and I feel terrible. And pretty soon the child develops the feeling of, I can't. Every time I try something different, I get punished. I can't. This is like the Pavlovian response, where the Pavlov would ring the bell and feed the dog meat, and the dog would salivate, and Pavlov would ring the bell while he fed the dog meat, and the dog would salivate. They would keep doing that. Pretty soon, Pavlov would just ring the bell and the dog would salivate. What happens in adult life is that this creates what we call the fear of failure. The fear of failure is a conditioned response to a process of destructive criticism that occurs in the first 5 or 6 years of life. The fear of failure automatically triggers us. We feel anxious, tense, uneasy. We feel tension and stress in our solar plexus. We feel like withdrawing and getting away from the event. And the fear of failure is the major reason for failure in adult life. It's the major reason why we hold back from fulfilling our potential. As a matter of fact, all negative habit patterns are experienced in the physical body. That you can tell a negative habit pattern because you actually feel it in your physical body. The inhibitive negative habit pattern, the fear of failure, the I can't, is experienced first of all in the solar plexus. You ever have an occasion where you have to speak in front of a group, or you have to go into a performance review, or you have to make a cold call? First of all, the solar plexus tightens up. If the fear situation continues, you start to breathe harder, and your heart starts to beat faster, your respiratory rate. And sometimes you get a headache, like a migraine headache in the front of your head. Sometimes your throat will tighten up and you won't be able to speak. You'll go completely dry. Sometimes you'll get so tense and so frightened that you'll have to run and go to the bathroom. These are all manifestations. There's no physical danger, but there's a psychological danger, a conditioned response. And whenever we feel these things, the natural tendency is to back away from the situation that's causing them, which is the reason why we don't achieve very much if we are held back. The second negative habit pattern is the compulsive. Now, the compulsive negative habit pattern is learned when children are told over and over again, you'd better or else. If you don't, you're in big trouble. Now you're going to get it. It's when children are made the recipients of what is called conditional love. Parents don't mean to do this, but what they do is they suggest to the child that you are not loved, therefore you're not safe, unless and until you do what we want. The child grows up feeling that I have to do what Mommy wants. I have to please Mommy. I have to please Daddy. I have to please other people. I have to please my siblings. Eventually I have to please my peers. I have to please my teachers. I have to please everybody. They grow up with this, I have to. I have to. I have to. I can't do what I want to do. I have to do what pleases other people. This compulsive negative habit pattern very early in life translates into the fear of rejection. The fear of rejection is experienced by men as adults as type A behavior. We'll talk about type A behavior later on in the course. Type A behavior is a compulsive, an obsessive-compulsive need to somehow please somebody with no standards of performance so that you can never accomplish it. The fear of rejection drives us. It makes us very, very sensitive to the opinions of other people. We do things that other people want. We don't do things that we want. We're always trying to please others. We have a preoccupation or a concern with the opinions and feelings and attitudes of others to the point where we deny our own needs. Now, the fear of rejection is felt down the back half of the body. If you divide the body in half, it's felt right down the back half of the body. The first place you start to feel the fear of rejection is usually in the shoulders and in the neck. You start to feel stiff and sore and tense. Sometimes when you have a lot to do, you'll feel tremendous stress in the lower back. The muscles will start to pull in the lower back. Sometimes it'll manifest itself in phlebitis and varicose veins. Very often it can give you very bad headaches in the back of the head because the carotid arteries, which carry blood up into the head, the muscles around them constrict, and the amount of blood flow to the head slows down, and you feel this pounding headache in the back of your head. These two fears, the compulsive, or these two negative habit patterns, the compulsive and the inhibitive, which are the result of destructive criticism, the great destroyer of personalities, plague us all our lives. Now, the wonderful thing about these is because they are learned habits, we can unlearn them. We can overcome the fear of failure that holds us back. We can overcome the fear of rejection that causes us to do things that please other people rather than pleasing ourselves by working on our own self-esteem. Because there is an inverse relationship between self-esteem and the basic negative habit patterns. Is the more you like yourself, the less you fear failure. The more you like yourself, the less you fear rejection. The more you like yourself, the less you fear anything. And if you continue to repeat, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, over and over again, if you continue to say this, eventually, over time, your self-esteem goes up higher and higher and higher, and your fears go down. As your self-esteem goes up, your fears go in the opposite direction.